Thank you. For anyone who wants to catch up with the discussion from last 2 weeks ago, probably the best place to do that is on sandwichschoolnews.com. The text of the first two, and by tomorrow the text of the third one will be up online on that site. There's also embedded in the text are some links that go to where the data came from. And for those of you who would like to see it presented verbally, there are 5-minute video clips that go with each of those things. The video clips were courtesy of Sandwich Cable TV, and of course the Enterprise has printed the first two the last 2 Fridays, and they're going to print the next one tomorrow. All that said, this isn't about what's in the Enterprise, what's on sandwichschoolnews.com, or what's on SCTV. It's about the long-range plan. And the long-range plan is the management tool that this board adopted about 1.5 years ago to help us make progress toward the local comprehensive plan, which town meeting adopted in May of 2009. So don't lose sight of the fact that it's all about the local comprehensive plan and how to make it happen, how not to let it sit on the shelf and collect dust as a couple of its predecessors did. The long-range plan is structured like it is in 4 sections. The first section deals primarily with efficient delivery of government services, including education. It's all about regulating, controlling, whatever you want to call it, the amount of money we have to draw from the tax base in order to provide those services. It's the tax levy control. Section 3 is doing whatever we can to increase the size of the tax base. That's the bottom number on that equation I went over last week. And then the fourth section is about not losing sight of our community's character while we're trying to do the things in the other sections. So that's 1, 3, and 4. Section 2 is titled Capital Asset Management, and that's the focus tonight for me anyway, and I hope we'll have a productive discussion about it. I started off the fourth segment of those things that I've been writing with a statement that of necessity, the lion's share of the capital dollars available to Sandwich have gone into the school system for about the past 4 decades. I say of necessity because the community grew by leaps and bounds, and as Frank pointed out 2 weeks ago, our school population probably grew even faster than the overall population. You said it was topped out around 20% were of school age at one point. That's off a little bit. It's probably down to 16 or 15 now, but it's far above anything that any other community experiences. So that's the history. A lot of capital went to the schools. That dug us a bit of a hole in that we were not addressing some of the other areas where citizens have a right to expect us to provide service. Now, the only chart that I'm going to use tonight is the one up there that's, it says Part 4, Capital and Debt Management. And there's a list of big ticket capital items. Now, the top one says it's not meant to be in priority order. It's the order that they happen to occur to me, which probably says something subconsciously about what my priority order is, but I hope you won't read too much into the order that they're there. That's the order they occurred to me, and that's all there is to it. The first one, public safety facilities. In a way, it's unfortunate that became facilities so quickly. I can't deny that probably the committee went into it with a building mindset, but the real crux of that one is that we are underserving the quarter of our population that is more than 8 minutes away from a fully manned fire emergency services facility. So the real goal of that project is to bring everybody into that 8-minute envelope, and the proposal that's on the table does that. The next one down the list is, we're on the edge, some people would say we're over the edge of underserving our senior population. And in 10 years, there's going to be twice as many seniors in the population as there are now, and Frank and I are going to need a place to go play cribbage or checkers or something when we get done doing this.
Speak for yourself.
The next one is, our beaches are eroding. The area beach is in terrible shape, and we need to do something about it. And so it makes the list, and it's going to require money. Water resource management, we're dealing with a plan, but eventually that plan is going to come down to a treatment facility and some pipes to get there. And economic development is not going to happen if we don't find a way to manage our water resources. Roads and infrastructure deterioration. Twice during the 3 years I've been up here, Paul Tilton has come to us with a request. He points out to us that there's some index that calculates what shape our roads are in, and every year it measures worse. And he points out that roads don't deteriorate in a straight line. Once the top coats go, the base goes, and once the base goes, it's a real mess to try and sort it out. So road deterioration is another one that at least made my list. There's a positive there, though. If the roads get rougher and rougher, it's going to be tougher for us to kick the rest of these things down the road. Next one I put on there is school facilities. Linnell and I went to a meeting at 4:30 this afternoon and scrambled to get back here for this meeting. The meeting was directly about school facilities and what's the probability and the steps that might be taken to consolidate the schools from the current 4 buildings into 3, when it might happen, what it might cost, how to get community support for doing it if we decide to do it. Next one is if we decided that the wing school was no longer to be a school at some point out in the distant future, not so distant, 4 years, 5 years, what is the appropriate use for that facility? We have 140,000 square feet under a roof that's reasonably sound and enclosed in an envelope that's sound. Rumors to the contrary, the boiler system was replaced in 2001, not 1964. So, and the consultant's report was all aimed at what would it cost to reconstitute that building as a school, a single building and a school. The standards for a school are much more stringent than the standards for some other things that we might choose to use it for. So we'd have to recost all of that if we decide to do something along those lines. With library facilities, I don't think anyone would argue that we don't need to expand the library. How much and at what cost? There's plenty of room for debate on that one. And efficient municipal offices, where Bud's crew is scattered over 5 or 6 different locations, and those buildings are not in terrific shape. So there's a need to, both for efficiency and working conditions, to invest in consolidating our municipal office facilities. Now, that's the list that I came up with. Maybe there's something on there that the rest of the board doesn't feel merits being on there. Maybe there are some things that the other members of the board would like to add, or Bud. Bud gets I think we have to let Bud weigh in on this as well. So the first thing I'd like to see us discuss tonight is this the complete list, or what does the complete list look like? So get a list. I expressed myself 2 weeks ago as to saying that I didn't think prioritization would add a lot of value. The rest of you felt differently. So, okay, let's prioritize the list. And I have a suggestion, which after we talk about the list, I'll give you a suggestion as to how we might come up with a very preliminary prioritization, something that we've charged the Capital Improvement Planning Committee with working this task. We shouldn't take the bat out of their hands. But we should at least give them the dubious benefit of our collective thoughts on this in a preliminary way, and let them come back and tell us what their take is, and maybe they'd like to help us rearrange it a little bit. So with that, I will again be quiet and listen and see if we can't if there's other things you want to put on the list, now's the time to bring them up. If there's things you don't think belong there, then let's hear about that too.
All right, let's open it up for discussion. And go ahead, Frank.
The items that you have, Jim, are pretty consistent. In fact, I think all of them that are up there, maybe with the exception of the wing school complex, were the same items that we, when Linnell and I ran those, forums to solicit input from the community about what they thought were the items that we needed to look at. And again, what we did in 2007 was to get a sense. So, we're all going to have different opinions about this. I'm not sure whether there's a value in prioritizing all of them, but there may be some value in prioritizing the top 4 or 5 or something like that.
Go ahead. Bud.
On a few of the items up there, just to clarify, like in my opinion, water resources management includes more than just the wastewater, it's the water itself. And granted, the Sandwich Water District is separate from the town, but if we don't work in concert with each other, planning for the future, which the district does an outstanding job at, we should just remember that that's part of it as well, and it might not be a part that we have to worry about funding, but it sure should be one that we're still cognizant of as things go forward. And in my mind, I'm trying to think about how, when I start wrapping up my first draft of the long-range capital plan, I think on some of the municipal offices, I'm going to need to break a couple of them out individually. And I know this line is focused more on if we consolidated things. But I think there's some maybe more pressing buildings that might have bigger issues than others. And the one that jumps out at me is the annex. Like, that's one I think we need to think about a lot sooner, possibly, than when everyone is able to relocate to one building, but maybe the timing will work out okay. So that I'm just pointing that out as more as informational. And then the 2 other projects I thought that we should add, and as Frank had said, I went back and looked at the list he, Linnell, and I had worked on as that group that looked at it in 2007. One should not cost the taxpayers $1, and that's the Marina office building. That's one that I think is critical to do within the next couple of years as soon as we get the sign-off from the Army Corps. It was included as permission that we could spend funds generated at the marina to pay for that in the recent lease extension that we did with the Army Corps. And we're still waiting on a sign-off from them on the exact location. If you remember, we had picked out one spot. It was more or less our 3rd choice for where it would be located, and then some things changed down there in terms of a future footprint of the marina expansion, and our number 1 choice became available again. So we're asking the Corps to reconsider if they would, allow us to consider that. So that's one. And the other one that I know a lot of people spent a lot of time on was our recreation field master plan. There were 12 different youth sport boards in town, the rec department, and to me that's a very valuable document. And I know it's one that we all bought into in terms of if money, what we'd like to go to, and it was just in terms of fields. It's not in terms of a community center, but just in terms of field space. And since we did our list back in 2007, we've gotten permission to put public recreation up at the golf course. So I think that dovetails really nicely. So I would just say the only 2 things I would think about adding is marina office building, knowing that probably isn't going to cost us anything. And then just, for lack of a better word, I think we call it the recreation field master plan.
Go ahead, Linnell.
Good suggestions, Bud. The one thing about the annex that occurred to me when you were talking about it is, and this is part of this is expressed in the report that the Capital Improvement Planning Committee did, and that is the amount of repairs that would be necessary to the annex to make it a healthy building. I've always had concerns about that building. Being a former OSHA inspector, it does not meet good public health standards for working environments. So one thing I wonder about where that should be in terms, I like the way you phrased efficient municipal offices, but that doesn't really address what do we do with the annex. And one of the issues of the annex, I think also, is that if there is a way to hold on to the annex, to make it usable, but move those offices somewhere else, would the annex provide additional growth for the library?
I would think it would, and
Yeah.
I think if we ever thought about giving up that property, like, we'd have to do a lot of soul searching. What do we do about the parking lot? Because as we
Exactly.
know, parking's a premium, and maybe that's something we'd always want to hang on to. But that's
So I'm
That's for
wondering
further
if the
down the road.
annex should be pulled out of the efficient municipal office and maybe moved up because of those things that are kind of critical to, there's several critical aspects of looking at the annex. One is the literal health status of the environment. We know in the basement is just substandard. In fact, haven't we already had somebody sue us who worked there formerly? So we have some real issues with that environment. So I don't know how to express that. Maybe it would be a study of that particular building, or how to accommodate those offices elsewhere. But I think that probably should move up. The second thing that strikes me, and this is where prioritizing for me could serve a purpose in planning, is what can we accomplish, in a reasonable amount of time. Like public safety facilities, we're addressing that. That's now out there, that's before the public. The senior community center, I don't see that that's in any budget and any plan. So is that realistically something we can accomplish as our number 2 item? Or is, for me, realistically what we can accomplish as our number 2 item at this point in time, potentially is the beach erosion or the road infrastructure. If you could speak briefly to the $2 million bonding that we just got noticed about, which reminds me of something else that we might want to put on that, and that would be our bicycle riding, our bike paths that are suggested that some of that bonding be used for that. Is that correct?
Now I know what you're talking about. The
Just-
State
right,
House has
just the
been
state-
working on
exactly, yeah.
another transportation bond bill.
Right.
And typically, communities
Transportation
like
bond bill,
ours
sorry.
try to get projects in their towns listed on it. And we're not always successful in doing that, but because of the strength of our legislative delegation, I should first preface it by saying, just because you get listed doesn't mean you get funded, even if
Yep.
the bond bill gets approved. Probably the best example is the Quaker Meeting House Road sidewalks. That bond bill was passed almost a decade ago, and we just got money, not from that source, but from a separate source a short while ago. But it's everything we can do that's on that, to list there helps. And so, again, we were asked, pick a project between like 1 million and 2 million that we'd like to do. So Paul Tiltman and I talked, and we came up with, and it was very short notice, if you redid Main Street to Jarvis Street to 6A, and then Main Street continued on to 6A, complete road reconstruction, sidewalks are terrible, and, a lot of them were put in so long ago they would no way meet handicap requirements, and basically redo everything, lighting, and that came up to 2 million. So that was listed, and then I'm gonna probably forget 1 or 2, and then 3 smaller items were put on there, and I think those were things that both of our legislative delegation had been, their offices had been contacted about. One was a sidewalk on Sandy Neck Road from basically the town line to Route 6A, meaning the Barnstable town line to Route 6A. And there were 2 smaller ones, and I'm embarrassed, I'm drawing a blank right now.
One of them is the bike path,
Oh,
what they're calling a transportation connector between the marina area and the village.
Yeah, I think they're trying to find a way, as part of that full Cape Cod bike plan, that
Right.
they pick bike projects along the way that aren't, that we don't have a rail trail like they do further down Cape or along in Shining Sea in Falmouth. So I think, they were trying to find ways to connect our existing locations so that would further connect down Cape.
So maybe in general, it's the bike paths that maybe we need to add. And then lastly, going back to the senior community center, which of course is kind of a no-brainer that we've got to start making a real plan for that. I don't think we can honestly expect the Friends of the Council on Aging to raise the funds to build that community center. So if that, where that goes also, I would think, would be an indicator of where are we in making that happen? What is our commitment to making that happen? And I don't think we've discussed that, because I think in the few years that have gone by since they came before us and said, can we have the land? And I believe years ago there was an attempt for a grant, but I don't think there are grants now available for community centers, for senior centers. So it occurs to me that that's a really good conversation to start having. Like, what do we have a plan? How can we make a plan for this? I know there's some discussion about mitigation with developers if we get into the South Sandwich Village area. But, you know, I think it would be worthwhile to begin discussing that real plan, and that would be also consistent with prioritizing.
And I think for clarity, and then I see Jim, you're on the edge of your seat, but for clarity, again, this is just a list Jim put
Right.
up. They are in no particular order. And I have some thoughts about prioritization, but I know, Jim, did you have thoughts about prioritization or prioritization metrics?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead.
First of all, the Marina office, as you pointed out, is not going to cost us a dime. And so that's why it's not on my list. And I don't, you know, if it could detract from our prioritization effort, it'd probably end up at the bottom because it's not going to cost us any money. Or I don't know, everybody's going to have to use their own criteria for how they set priorities. The recreation facilities plan, I think that definitely belongs on there. That was, I missed that one. So, yeah, the recreation master plan should, I would very much be in favor of that. I think the annex is a subtopic under the municipal office. It may be the first one we have to address. And we may have to jump on an opportunity to do something about that early on. It's the board's pleasure whether you separate that out or not. But if you know, just because it occurred to me last doesn't mean it's not at the bottom of my priority list. I'll tell you that right now. So I'm trying to, if you put too many little bites on a list with a lot of big bites, then the priority gets skewed toward the big bites sometimes. Or if your criteria is can we do it, then maybe the little ones end up at the top and the big ones get shortchanged. So I'm very much in favor of the recreation master plan. And I'm not against any of the rest of them being put on it. You know, it's our list. We can put whatever we want on it. So adding the bicycle, you know, the all mode friendly transportation into the public roads and infrastructure item, that's probably a good idea too. If we factor that, if we have that in our heads when we look at those words and include that in our prioritization, then that's fine. Now, I guess, Ralph, the question Ralph asked was, what do we do to prioritize the list? And again, it's important that we not handcuff the CIPC while we're doing this. From the two members of that group that I've talked to, I think they'd appreciate us giving them our first cut feelings on this. And I think there's a simple way to do that. If you remember how we picked the Charter Review Committee, we had a list of 11 good candidates and only seven spots. We said you must give everybody one. You can't give anybody more than 5. And that, I think, was the only restrictions we put on ourselves. We had the 11 candidates listed, and we all went home, and we all prioritized on that basis. I don't know where the magic comes from, but on a list of 10 things, usually you start at the biggest number you can give any single item is 7. You have to give everything at least 1, and you only get 30 points to split over the whole business. So with if we finalize the list, it now has 8 items. If you want to separate out the annex or substitute the annex for something else, fine. But if we go with these 10 items and those simple rules, 30 points, you got to use them all. Most you can give 1 is 7. Least you can give 1 is 1. We all go home and do that exercise and hand the results back to Doug. And I think.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay, and I think, you know, I believe Bud should have a vote in this as well. I think it should be the 5 selectmen and Bud filling out this sheet. Collate the numbers, put that result in our next data package, on the one that would come out with the meeting for the 23rd, and then we can discuss it there. If we get it to Bud in time, he could take it to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee as nothing set in bronze, nothing cast in concrete. It's just our first cut at what the priorities should look like. If that would be acceptable to and John can catch up. The tape of this meeting will be available through
Through the 22nd.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we should, and the tape of the last meeting is available right now. So if that's acceptable to everybody, I had Kathy type up the sheets with a couple blank lines so we can put in anything else we want.
Linnell, then Frank.
It's not that I dislike that idea well, I'm dubious about that idea for this reason. Our job is to discuss and create appropriate policy, not make a game out of it. So I think that we're really close with this list. I would rather see us move a few things around. I don't think we need to go through that exercise. But I would acquiesce if everybody else wanted to do it that way. But I think it would give the community the impression that, it was a happenstance how we came up with these rather than, a real directed and focused conversation. But I'll go along with anybody because, there's 5 of us. If you guys want to do it that way, that's fine. I don't think it's the best way for us to do this. I appreciate this list. I do think that one real crucial thing about the marina, I see why it's not on your list, but I would disagree that it's not going to cost us a penny. There will be staff dollars spent on the marina. There will be meetings. There will be people from the staff in those meetings. We will be spending tax dollars to make that marina office. So I think it should be on the list because, again, what I liked, what I was hoping we would do back in '07, and what I still hope we do is to commit to this work. So if the marina, I think Bud made a very good point, the marina is close to being a done deal. Funding-wise it is. We don't have to come to the taxpayers to ask for additional money, but we can't be so naive as to not think that we're going to be not spending any taxpayer money. We will, because our staff is going to be involved in directing this project. So that not only will we be spending staff money, but their time will be taken up by this project. So it should be on that list, and it should be probably somewhere towards the top. Just that comment that Bud made me think this is what's been missing the whole time I've been sitting here. If there's something like that we can accomplish, then let the staff go after accomplishing that. Of course, I realize we're waiting for that one but there's a time frame that can be established. It's that time frame that I get the impression the public would really like to see us tackle, and that time frame comes from this list, then prioritizing and saying, what are we going to tackle first? Or are there 3 things that we're working on? Like right now, there's definitely more than 3 things up there that we're working on. But just to have them kind of established as, this is what we're working on, this is what we hope to accomplish next. I don't know, I don't have as much corporate experience as you, Jim, but in the DOD, you had, your files on your desk, you had your active files, you had, 10 projects that were active, and you were working on them all at the same time. And when one was done, you put it in the file cabinet. So that's what I think we need to create with this. And I absolutely agree. We can give it to the CIPC, but we need to give them direction as to what we feel the community is saying to us are priorities. So we know public safety, we know the senior community center, but we have never committed to the senior community center other than to, well, I take that back. Before I came on board, there was a commitment through the first deal with the Golden Triangle. So, but at this point in time, for many years, we haven't. So I would like us to, however we do it, I would like us to look at creating the priority list as a action item list. And I actually think that Bud makes a good point about the marina being on this list. The other thing that I wanted to just say is the expanded library. Because they already have the grant application in and they're in line, I also think that we should maybe think kind of logically about what may be coming up, where we have to give some attention. I'm not sure if there is a time frame established to the library, but that is something that's already in play in terms of the grant is in. We've moved up, I think we moved up 2 things on the waiting list. So those are some of my concerns.
Frank?
Just a couple of things. I agree that the marina building should be on the list for some of the same reasons that Linnell just said. I mean, there is time, there's going to be some costs associated with it. The unknown factor with this project, since it's completely out of our control, is the Army Corps of Engineers. They're going to decide. Our experience with the Army Corps of Engineers is one of waiting, and waiting, quite honestly. However, having said that, Bud could get a call tomorrow and said, we approved it, so then what would we do? We start redirecting resources that are currently working on other things to this particular project. And Linnell's right. This project, even though we're not going to fund the majority of it, is going to take a lot of resource time from Bud's limited staff, no question about it. Now, with respect to Jim's idea, the way I see Jim submitting this proposal for going home and taking the list and grading it is to kind of get the ball rolling. And let's stop procrastinating on this thing. We have different feelings about it. What keeps popping up in my mind is somewhere between $70 to $100 million to do all of this stuff. And I say, well, how the hell are we going to do all this stuff? But we should still, and I think our primary responsibility is to go through the planning process. And I think it starts with, let's start prioritizing, as Ralph said 2 weeks ago, we should prioritize.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Yeah, again, this exercise was not meant to be, as it says, it doesn't set anything in concrete. It doesn't cast anything in bronze. It's a first step toward having that conversation. Now, if when we all go home and go through the exercise and come back, what usually happens when you use this technique is the list separates into top, middle, and bottom, and then from there you can have the conversation as to whether anything that's at the top should be in the middle, anything in the middle should be. We still have to have that conversation, but we can shorten that conversation by doing this exercise first. That's my only intent, was not to avoid that conversation, but to get, Frank used the words, get the ball rolling. Just each of us independently rank things, give them to somebody to run the totals, and then debate them after we see them.
I think Frank was up.
Just quickly,
Go
if you're going to have Kathy or whoever is going to redo the list, would you just put your instructions down in terms of the scoring?
Okay.
Yeah.
I did the first time I gave it to him.
All right, Linnell?
Okay, that makes sense. As long as it's long as it's not like, oh, okay, here it is, as we get to discuss it, because I think that makes perfect sense. So what we need to add 2 things to this list. It sounds like there's consensus to do that. So that doesn't have to be a motion, but I think we need to add the marina office and the recreation field master plan. Is everybody in agreement to that? I
Yes.
think that seems. The annex, I am concerned that the annex somehow be represented separately, but we can discuss that later.
Okay. Go ahead, Bud.
Yeah, just a couple things. I wanted to make sure, and I'll make sure I get this done before my 9 o'clock meeting tomorrow and get it out to you. But yeah, just so I'm perfectly clear, you just want me to list those 2 things, and the other 2 I had down as preliminary were the annex improvements and the bike paths / pedestrian improvements.
Yeah. Well,
I think the bike path should be
you want
listed
those too?
separately. Yeah, I do.
You want them separate?
Because there's separate funding in there. Because that's where the roads and infrastructure, I think that the bike paths should be separate because we're
What about
looking
the
at
annex?
separate
Take it
funding.
off? You know what I would say for now, if you don't mind? I would say take it off for now, because the other thing I was going to stress, what you haven't seen, what Jim and I sort of drafted, we use the word preliminary, and I think it's important to use the word preliminary prioritization because you don't want to prejudice the CIPC. And I know when I write it up, I'm going to include a section on the annex alone. And why don't we see what we get back from them once we get working on that,
makes
if that makes sense.
Okay, and Frank?
I think when we get to the discussion part after this scoring, then we can, do sub-headings and maybe then even prioritize those kinds of things, that are under the efficient, municipal offices category.
Am I
And
not?
so I agree with you.
Okay.
Let's not do it for now. That's what I would suggest.
So if I add it up right, that leaves us with, we'll have a list of 12 things. Jim wanted it up to 7 when we had 9 things. Do you want to change that number, or do you want to keep it 7, or?
Well, who do we want to alienate tonight?
Well, I think we have an
The bike
opportunity
people?
to alienate somebody
Okay.
next time we meet. So again, this is the, let's stress the fact that it is a preliminary list. You know, we'll go through the metrics. This will be a base for our discussion, and we're in agreement that we'll look at the list, we'll go through it, and then we'll be prepared for August 23rd to discuss what our preliminary priorities are that we want to present it to this capital planning improvement committee.
So we're going to keep it at 12? I'm in
There are
favor-
some, you know, there's
I'm
an
in favor of
opportunity
keeping
to
it at
put
12.
some, add something in, and I think that should be part of the discussion on August 23rd. If there's something which has been overlooked tonight, who, you know, if you feel strongly about, we should make a case for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I said the 7, I just meant on the actual way that you rate it. So when I write the instructions,
Oh,
I'll
okay.
understand.
rating thing.
The
Okay.
way-
Not
yeah.
7
Sorry.
items. I meant you had
So
7
what-
votes.
The way this works, I wish I could remember the references to where this was all described by some mathematician guy. But it's, the best thing, what you do is you go, you take the number of things you've got, subtract 2. So now we've got 12,
let's
so
go
the top
10.
number becomes 10. And the total number of points you're allowed to have is 2.5 times the number of things that are on the list. Or is it 3 and a, yeah.
You got that, Bud?
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's 12 things on the list, 12, so you're still,
So it's 10.
so instead of 30 points,
24, 30, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
so, but,
That's
yeah,
easy to
maybe it's, yeah, I think we're gonna need 40 points to make it separate, is the way it goes, but, let's split the difference and say 35, yeah?
All right. All right.
It will, I think it's gonna work, yeah, so the top number you can give any one item becomes 10. The total points you've got, make it 35, and you gotta give everything at least 1. And
All
I
right,
think
I'm
that-
not trying to be a stickler, because I just know when
Yeah.
I get back, I'm going to be scratching my head when I get
Yeah.
everyone's score sheets back. Do you mean we're supposed to go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but when we get to 1, there's going to be two items
Three
that
ones,
don't
there's
have
gonna be
anything, we have to put ones
There's
on
gonna
both
be 3
of
ones
those.
left over. That's the way it would work if
Okay.
we only had 9 things, but
So
now.
you can't go like 10, 10, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Yes, you
Well,
can,
you
you can
could,
do
yeah.
that.
Why
You can,
couldn't
you
you?
can split your 35 points any way you want.
How about we just rank them 1 to
As-
12, the lowest collated total wins?
Well,
but-
yeah, we could say 1 to 12, but I'll bet you dollars to donuts, one of us will decide he wants to have 2 10s and so I prefer, it's up
That's
to
the
you
problem.
guys, but I
Yeah.
prefer the flexibility of if I want to use a bunch of 7s and a bunch of 1s, then I could do that. I'm not going to, but it's that sort of thing. So are we okay with most you can give is 10, you have to give 1, and you got 35 points to split over everything.
I think that's good. We'll go with
Okay.
Jim, and that, again, that's the point, it's the basis of
Yeah,
discussion.
And again, it's preliminary, it's just our individual thoughts. We can prioritize them any way we want. Some will prioritize on their relative importance, some will prioritize on whether we can accomplish them in a short time, some will do which ones affect the most people. Everybody, each one of the 6 of us that'll be participating, the 5 selectmen and Bud, will have our own criteria for doing that, and we'll have something when we come back on the 23rd.
Okay, Bud, you got that?
I think we should let Doug vote, and I'll make him vote the exact opposite of me, so we cancel each other out.
All right, so is it, we done with this discussion?
Yes.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Frank.
Just one final thing. The document itself, the long-range plan
Yes.
document, having gone through it, I'm saying, gee, we've accomplished a lot
Yeah,
of
we've done a
things.
ton of things on there.
So
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we need to, maybe within a month or
Yeah.
so, but just kind of have a status
Yeah.
report on all of the individual items and report out as to where we are. This is another good
Yep.
year
Yep.
in terms of accomplishments, I think, for the board, so.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. In those terms, the proposal 2 months ago, I think, was to do one section at a time. I was reading, the minutes we just approved say that Paul Tilton's going to come back to us at the end of August with a,
I keep saying September, but because,
yeah.
yeah, I mean,
But-
he's in California right now. He's
Yeah.
not going to be
So
here
if
at our
we-
next meeting, but
All right, so if
Yeah.
we were to, yeah. At our next meeting, maybe we review sections 3 and 4, the two sections that are on economic development and tax-based growth, and the one on community preservation, community lifestyle preservation. And we do section 1, we do when Paul is ready to come and talk to us about, that becomes the center of this, but we review the rest of section 1 that night as well. And we're going to be working on section 2 on the 23rd. We just defined that by saying we're going to discuss the relative priorities of the
Right.
capital improvement projects our next meeting. So we'll do section 2 next meeting. Sections 3 and 4, maybe the meeting after. In section 1, when Paul's ready to come and talk to us about how pay-as-you-throw is working out. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
All right.